Welcome back to the Meat of the Matter. Every week, Mark, Peter, and I, we get to sit down with amazing people. We hear their stories of healing, weight loss, autoimmune reversal. And this week, Mark and I had the pleasure of sitting down with none other than Eddie Goeke. And if you don't know who Eddie Goeke is, you should, because he's calling out people all over the internet for being wrong and the science, and he's got a good grasp of things. Not only that, he's written a book called Contraindicated, and I'm currently reading it right now. And we sat down for about 2 hours, so we split this into two parts. Part one is pretty much his story. Part two is more of a conversation about what he does and what he thinks. And we had a great time. Such a great time that actually Eddie's agreed to come back and host the podcast, The Meat of the Matter, live on Sundays on June 29th. So we're looking forward to having him co-host, answer questions, talk about his book. And I believe Peter and Eddie might have a few things to say about a certain individual that posts up a lot of videos that they both strongly disagree with. It should be a great time. It should be fun. But this two-parter, we're going to put part one, Eddie's story. Part two is going to be a little bit more of a conversation. And just a heads up, the first part, the internet video got a little laggy. We do come from different places. You know, Eddie's in the States, I'm in Canada, Mark's in Ireland. So the audio is perfect. I'll put some subtitles on there for you too. And I hope you'll enjoy learning and hearing about Eddie Goeke. Today we have a very special guest. We're excited to talk to. I think Mark's going to have to apologize to Peter. Peter can't be here today. He's crazy busy at work, but we have a guest that is an author. He's a YouTube influencer, and I think a necessary component of all the carnivore community and the space. And his story is quite fantastic. And we want to just welcome you on to the Meat of the Matter, Eddie, and thanks for joining us today. It's really awesome to meet you.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to do this. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. So why don't we just dive right into, how did you become Eddie Goeke, especially on YouTube, and an author and all that stuff, and a carnivore?
Oh man, yeah, that's all. Fortunately, it's all one story. It's not multiple different stories. However, the story is quite lengthy. So I'll try and keep it as brief as possible while, maintaining the importance of all the details and all the critical details. So my story really started at 16 years old. I was freshly 16. And I was a student at my high school, just like everyone. I was just a normal kid, just like everyone else my age, or so I thought. I was at the time. And I remember I was going to my third hour class, going class to class. And my second hour class was a strength training class. And so afterwards I'm all hot and sweaty, and my heart is racing, and all that stuff like normal. And I'm also tired because, of course, my fuel was a 6-pack of chocolate donuts and some juice in the morning, like the classic public school breakfasts. And I remember I sat down in my third hour class, and it's like warm and it's very comfortable in there. So I actually put my head down to go to sleep. And I never did that. It was very odd, but I was like, okay, I'll take the opportunity here. But for some reason, I noticed I had this butterflies feeling in my stomach. Everyone knows what that feeling is, but usually it's elicited from actual situations going on around you that are anxiety inducing. Something's going on. You're about to give a presentation. There's a threat that you face, whatever. Okay, but I didn't have that, and it was almost like it was being caused physiologically, but there was no reason for it, which caused a negative feedback loop, because if you don't know the cause as to why you're feeling these things in your body, then you're going to get nervous, which then causes the feeling to get worse. And then it just was spiraling out of control. And I remember I had my first panic attack that day, and it was really weird. It was almost like I got injected with adrenaline or something, and I just had like a physiologically induced panic attack. And I had to leave the classroom. And I remember thinking, what the hell was that? I have no idea what's going on. I'm not an anxious person. I'm pretty easygoing. I remember I was like, maybe I'm really sick. And I didn't drive at the time, so I had my parents pick me up. And I was like, yeah, what I don't know what's going on. It's really, but I thought it was a fluke. And as much as I thought it was, it definitely wasn't. And unfortunately, my life never went back to normal after that. I started having really, really arcane, mysterious symptoms. I was starting to have that heart racing feeling happen anytime that I stood up. So it was basically equivalent to POTS. I was having tachycardia, and then I would get lightheaded. I never had any fainting spells or anything like that, but um, I could never get my heart rate below 130 BPM standing. It was really weird. I never felt like I was fully replete with sleep, no matter how much sleep I would actually get. I felt like I got 5 hours, 6 hours of sleep. And then a lot of these other symptoms like muscle twitching. Um, I had nerve pain in my peripheral tissues, my wrists and like my toes and all that stuff. And then the worst symptom, the most severe of all of them, actually came to be developed. And it's one that throws people off every time. Uh, I basically had debilitating, crippling, excruciating pain anytime in my abdomen, like in my rib area, solar plexus. Anytime I would experience any emotion, negative, positive, um, it got to the point where I couldn't watch TV. Anything that elicited emotions from it, it got so bad eventually. Months went by, missing school and all that stuff. Months went by, and I was actually I couldn't even hold conversations with people if we started talking about something that I was passionate enough about. Really weird. It doesn't even sound physiological. That sounds like a spiritual problem or something like that. But in reality, it was absolutely, as we came to understand years later, it was physiological. But I was very confused. We went to every doctor that we could, think of. First, my general care practitioner, and of course, they do some blood tests and they look at that and they say, "Oh, you're normal," which is sort of define normal, and is normal actually healthy also, and all these other things, as we all know to think about, when people say normal. But went to my general care practitioner a few times actually, and everything came back normal every time. um he recommended that I look into getting some psychological care. Of course, it's all anxiety related. You're making problems up in your head, right? And to give the absolute benefit of the doubt, to be as forgiving as possible, as much as we don't like the medical sphere, if someone does tell you a symptom that mysterious, every time that I feel emotion, it hurts. It does sound a little psychological on the surface. I'll give some credit where credit's due, but it didn't help my situation knowing that it was not mental. 16 years old, I've never had any problems with that, and then out of nowhere, spontaneously, that happens. We go to a neurologist, nothing happened. In fact, my neurologist said, "Oh, well, you do have some neuropathy for your nerve pain, muscle twitching that you've been having in your left elbow. The solution is to gain some weight because fat insulates the tissue, so you're not, the nerve isn't directly in contact with your." It's just, I understood the logic or really lack thereof, but it clearly was not the problem. And I really was losing all hope, to the point where, I had depression because I wasn't able to live my life alongside my friends. It seemed like they were all advancing while I wasn't, having to stay at home all the time, um, playing video games basically. Like I felt like a bum playing video games, staying home from school. Like it's not like I wanted to do that, but I was like, I don't know what to do. And eventually, out of spite almost, I said, "Okay, well, if no one can figure out the problem, I'm gonna force myself to go to school still. I'm just gonna keep going." And, it sucked. I had to continuously skip some classes for at least 20 minutes sometimes, or up to 20 minutes sometimes, because I couldn't walk to class. I would be out of breath. I thought that I had heart problems. Everything was going back to the heart. It was freaking me out. I'm 16 years old. What's going on? Multiple emergency room visits, and they did EKGs on me. Nothing's showing up. Everything's normal. So this all started to the rising action really starts around 2020 when the pandemic hit. So again, I'm forcing myself to go to school, but I don't have a job yet. I was being continuously encouraged to get a job because I'm of that age, but I would always brush it off, because I was like, I'll do it eventually. I'll get to it. I would always have some excuse. And the main excuse was not even an excuse. Well, it was an excuse, it's a valid excuse, which was it hurts to even walk around. I don't really know of any utility I'll have to any job if I'm having to lean over and keel over because I can't have conversations with people. Um, and the reason I was hiding that was because even my members of my family who we're on good terms now, but they said they gaslit me into thinking it was in my head as well. They're supposed to be on my side. And now my brain was looking at them as the enemy because they were just completely discounting any credibility to what I was saying. And so I didn't even feel like safe enough to even open up to them, say all these other things. It was also a fault of my own because of this. I almost cringed every time I even said I can't work because of this, because I felt like worthless. So it was on both sides. I didn't even want to admit it because as soon as you utter it into existence, it becomes reality in your brain, even more real. So I didn't want to say that. But around the pandemic, I was actually, ironically, I was told by my stepfather at the time, if you don't get a job, we're taking everything from you. Like, we're taking all of your communication methods away from you. You think it's bad now that you can't see your friends in person. Well, you're not even going to be able to communicate with them. We're taking everything away because he thought that I was just being lazy this whole time they were encouraging me to get a job. When in reality, I actually had valid reasons. So I I did. I got a job at Walmart, one of the very few businesses still open at the time. And I started working in the warehouse position. So it was actually quite a bit of physical labor. Um, And that's when everything started to really get worse because my body was not, whatever was going on was still mysterious. We didn't know, but it was clear that I wasn't able to do these things. And again, sort of the same way I did with school, I was like, nope, I'm going to go because I'm being a responsible citizen. I'm doing this and that. Like I'm living up to my expectations. I'm actually giving back to the world here. I'm not just sitting around taking. And I worked there for about a year and I decided to get another job with better pay. And it was also a lot easier, but by the time that I got that job, I had run myself into the dirt long enough. Symptoms were getting way worse, and mainly, again, there's many symptoms I can give. There's a list of like 50. I remember putting it together, but almost basically 49 out of the 50 were subsidiary. They were still debilitating, but the main debilitating one was the emotion and feeling. Like it was just really the stomach, abdominal pain, and this all the climactic point was right at January of 2022. I remember walking down the stairs and going into the kitchen, and I turned my head just casually. I was just looking around, and I turned my head, and my vision went black for about a full second, which may sound like a completely insignificant amount of time, but I'll tell you, even a millisecond of losing vision is a significant amount of time. And I remember that scared the hell out of me. Um, I was like, it was almost, in a way, it was in a backwards way, it was validating because I was like, I know I have something going on with me. After everyone has been telling me that something is wrong with me, like, finally, like something showed up, as much as it was really, really scary and is portending something bad. Um, but given the fact that it really terrified me, my heart dropped, which caused immense pain in my stomach. So anything, it all goes back to that. So it really, I went, I was going towards the bathroom, and when I got in there, I fell on the ground, clutching my stomach, and I was like, "No, this is bad. I got to go on leave for work." And I was like, "I'm just gonna go on a 2 week leave, and then we're good. We're good to go. Like I'm fine." Well, that didn't end up, happening. I didn't go back to work because apparently the only thing that was still keeping me upright and functional was the very minimal amount of muscle mass I still had on my body, and when I stopped moving completely, I wasn't able to get back up and get back into the motions. Um, those are the worst few months of my life. I was completely bereft of any guidance. I had no idea what was happening. No one was of any help to me, in the medical space, and my family and friends, they don't know what's going on either. I can't expect them to. So I'm watching on social media all of my friends, live their lives and actually advance in their life, and it was me basically staring up the ceiling for, I mean, every waking hour of the day, basically anticipating my death. I thought I was gonna die. I was basically, like, certain I was gonna die. Something was clearly wrong. I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom. I couldn't make my own food. I had my father come home from work after, like, a 12 or 14-hour shift and make me food before he went to bed. I had no contact with anyone. Um, and again, I can't watch TV or do anything to pass the time. I'm on the ground. I was floor bound because the bed was causing me too much discomfort. And all I could do was just scroll and try and find answers. And so that's when answers really started to pop up. I was scrolling on Instagram, and at this point, I was following all these health and wellness pages that actually did focus on diet. I had changed my diet a little bit around that time, started eating more of the full, like the balanced diet sort of protocol because I was thinking to myself, well, I don't really have that much balance. And I also was operating under this notion that the more the better, like the more is the better. So it doesn't matter what I'm eating as long as I'm eating everything. Everything. Just nutrition is what matters, not anything that I should be removing, but I should just have everything. So I was making these massive bowls with vegetables and beans and peppers and I was having like a fruit smoothie alongside it and I was having like all the grains and then I was also having some like having like a chocolate chip cookie or something like that. And I was like, "Oh, well, as much as it's not the healthiest thing, I'm balancing it out with all these other things. I'm not missing out on anything." Yeah, that didn't do me any favors. And then, I started coming across the whole I did come across Doctor
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
he'll be back in a minute.
He fixates on lectins a lot.
Sorry, Eddie,
He's
you
the
just cut out
he
there for a
wrote the
second.
the plant paradox, I believe is what it's called.
Stephen
Are you guys frozen or are you
Yeah,
guys
you just
listening?
froze for a bit. We didn't hear what doctor. You said the doctor, and then you cut out, and then you came back
Yes.
and said lectins. I think you're going to say Stephen Gundry, but
Yeah. Dr. Stephen Gundry. That's on my end. I have a VPN on, so it's like sometimes it'll just cut out. Yeah, so yeah, Dr. Gundry. So I came across his book a while back. I know this is sort of we're going back a little bit, but it is important. I came across this book and I was mind blown. I was like, just the way I have to give him credit. I mean, even considering that plants could even be remotely toxic was something that I was just. It was so I didn't even have the approach of that's nonsense. It was more like, oh, duh. Obviously, why did we not think about that before? It makes complete sense. And so, yeah, once I read his book, like I started going on I cut out grains. And then I realized, oh, well, there's obviously more foods that have lectins in them. I should cut those out too. I went on like a Whole30 diet and then I went on the lectin-free sort of approach. And by the point that I was completely debilitated on leave, I was eating that way already. So I was following these pages, but I came across a post by someone that, frankly, they are a complete charlatan. But I guess a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So he posts something about this concept of vagus nerve inflammation, which wasn't really nutrition related, but it was health related. It was structurally related, and I went, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what this is. And it says symptoms that can correspond to it. And I was like, well, you haven't even told me what it is, but I'll read the symptoms. And the symptoms lined up with every single I wish I could find that post again. I've tried. This was years ago. Lined up with almost basically every single thing I was going through. And I was like, well, that's something. That's a major lead. I mean, I'm so messed up. I feel like you can find plenty of conditions that kind of match my symptoms, but you know what? It's still a lead. And so I was like, okay, well, vagus nerve inflammation. Well, what are the vagus nerves? And I realized that, oh, they're part of your parasympathetic nervous system. It's the opposite of your fight or flight, the rest and digest. And they're responsible for calming you down and keeping your heart rate at a regular pace and regulating your emotions. And I was like, oh, and you got two of them right here and they affect digestion. I've had digestive problems and abdominal issues for so long. I was like, okay, so that's what they are, but what can cause the inflammation? And of course, you've got the environmental toxins, the airborne, toxins and all that. But I found it quite a stretch to say that I'm like this debilitated with just breathing in the air around me. So I was like, okay, there's got to be something else. Well, lo and behold, I found out from a page after looking up vagus nerve inflammation. I looked up vagopathy or something like, or I found vagopathy from a website called caringmedical.com. And then I found a video from them It linked to a video on YouTube from their channel, Caring Medical. And I was like, who are these people? Well, the video was a 3-hour seminar on this condition called craniocervical instability. And I was like, well, what's that? Well, craniocervical instability is basically characterized by an instability or a laxity of the ligaments, which are what hold bone to bone, in your cervical spine leading up to your cranium. And so the bones, ligaments, if they hold bone to bone, if they're weak and way too lax, they won't do that job as well as they could be or as they should be doing. And so the bones will move around too much in your neck and it'll cause cracking and it'll cause, the bones to sort of deviate from their natural position and impinge on surrounding nerves. So it'll cause neuropathy and the arteries. So it'll cause lack of blood flow to the brain, depending on the position you're in. Most of the time, these people that have the condition, they don't have a curve in their neck. They don't have a cervical curve that's sufficient, to keeping the neck in optimal position. And I remember watching this and realizing, oh, well, the vagus nerves are in the neck. They start from the brainstem. And if I have a problem with my neck, yes, sure, it'll lead to vagus nerve inflammation. But as this doctor, Dr. Ross Hauser, so Caring Medical is a clinic in Florida. I realized this along the way. I was like, okay, so he treats this condition. He talks about, focuses in on this condition. He said in the seminar, he said, well, first it starts with inflammation, of course, because you're damaging the nerves. But if that damage never surceases at all, it leads to degeneration of the nerves. And it causes a completely reduced function of the neurology. And it'll cause catastrophe eventually. And I remember booking an appointment with them for an analysis, for a diagnosis, for an evaluation, really, without even telling anyone. I remember doing it. Like, I didn't even have a way to go there. This is in Florida. It was 14 hours away. And so I told my dad later, and I was like, yeah, I signed up to have an evaluation with them. And he was like, okay, yeah, no, let's do it. Like, we're desperate now. He went into debt for me. So eventually we get down to that clinic in April of 2022, and they start evaluating me. And they realize they do all these diagnostics I've never seen before. And I remember Ross Hauser meeting him. It was like meeting a celebrity. I'd watched him for months at this point on YouTube. And he said, if you had come any later, you were on your way for something catastrophic. I clearly had the condition of craniocervical instability. And being told that at 18 years old, I was like, I mean, I know that you're sugarcoating it, but I know exactly what that means in doctor language. I know what you're saying to me. But like I said at the beginning, ironically, and this will make sense to anyone that's been sick, it was the most relieving sense of validation that I had had. It's better to have answers and know what you have than to not know what you have at all, like have no answers whatsoever and just like anticipating your death, knowing that you're going down that road. And so it's always ironic when I say long story short after this, but long story short, I started undergoing regenerative treatments with them. The clinic, they employ PRP and prolotherapy. People may have heard that before. They do it in a comprehensive way. It's basically a syringe with a solution of, so in prolotherapy, it's water, dextrose, a plant compound that promotes inflammation. And as I always say when I'm telling this story, leave it to plants to do such a thing, But and I think there's a there's a slight numbing agent as well for like a localized area of the body, and they will inject the solution in between your ligaments, and it will launch an inflammatory cascade on that area to initiate healing. It doesn't naturally happen in a normal situation because ligaments have pretty poor blood flow. But you can actually stimulate the body to heal that area, even with the needle, without the solution, ironically enough. It's pretty interesting. And oh man, it worked. It did work. It was painful, but it worked. I had to undergo lots of treatments in certain areas, like over and over again, because it takes a while to build it back up. You're basically undergoing a second developmental stage in a way. And PRP is the same thing. They just use your blood and they spin it twice to concentrate the healing elements out of it. They do the same thing. Platelet-rich plasma is what that's called. And I was undergoing many treatments with them. But during the time, I was focused on diet, especially because I realized after reading Dr. Gundry's book, the importance of diet, even if it's not the cause of my condition or the cure, it could very well assist in the treatments and my symptoms. And so I was still on the search, for the right way of eating. And that's where we actually really lead into why I'm even making videos in the first place. I came across many people, Paul Saladino I'd come across before. First, I actually followed him, funnily enough, to laugh at his content because I thought it was so ridiculous. I was like, so you're really gonna you're eating so much red meat. That's the irony is that I was focusing on the red meat and not the fruit. Oh, on the red meat. I was like, oh
Oh,
my
how
God.
things change, hey? Oh, how things
Yeah,
change.
yeah. I was oh my God, you're causing aging. And I was focusing on like mTOR and IGF-1, all the stuff Dr. Gundry and Dr. Not Dave Feldman, but because I never heard of Dave Feldman at the time, but I think it's a Harvard scientist. I can't remember his name. David Sinclair, I think.
David Sinclair, yeah. The
Yeah.
genetics, the theory of aging, yeah.
Yep.
I
Yep.
bought his book and then found out that there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with the fraud and it's carrying.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is what it is, right?
Yeah. No, I
Very
had
compelling.
yeah, I was very familiar with him and Dr. Gundry, and so I bought into all that.
Yeah.
And I also, ironically enough, given that Dr. Gundry understands that fruit is supposed to be eaten and always has been eaten seasonally, and it's always rich in sugar, and the sugar molecules are the same, I actually thought the exact same thing about the fruit, believe it or not. Because I basically thought his diet was the number one way to shoot yourself to the grave, like as fast as possible. But I still was focusing way too much on the red meat, you know. But I followed him to laugh at his content originally, and I watched it. But eventually I was like, okay, this is so laughable that I like I'm not even passionate about it. You get to that point where you're watching it and you laugh so like it's so able to be mocked and it's so ridiculous that you're like, I don't even feel any emotion towards it. I don't even feel challenged. It's like, come on. But paradoxically, that led me to listening to more Paul Saladino, like listening objectively to what he was saying. And I went, well, that actually makes sense. And again, to just shoot past this as fast as I possibly can, I eventually adopted his diet. First, it was Dave Asprey, and I was eating more animal protein and animal fat, but still eating all the other stuff. But then I adopted Paul's diet, and I have to be extremely honest. I felt the worst on any diet that I had on any diet eating his way of eating. And I'm not making any causal claims here because there were multiple other things that changed. I was undergoing even more treatment. I was in an inflamed state naturally because that's what the treatment does. I actually had to increase chronic inflammation to get treated. And so that didn't help. I guarantee that didn't help. I was getting even more sunlight, but I was burning more because I hadn't had sunlight. I didn't even prioritize sunlight until that age, 18 years old. So I was actually I wasn't used to it, which causes even more inflammation. Many things that were still going on, but I have to be honest that it was associated with every time I would eat food, I would have an increase in blood pressure just sitting down. My face would start getting super red. I'd start sweating after my meals, which I think is called the meat sweats. Uh, the irony is I never really have that now, but uh, interesting. And I did gain 8 pounds because I never had a problem with weight ever. I've always been skinny. I've had a skinny phenotype, and my genotype really is just like it's a thin set, body type. But I still always looked at the scale just because I was like, I don't want to end up being because I was really obsessed with health and diet now. I was like, I don't want to. So I was looking at the scale, and I gained 8 pounds, but I didn't in the mirror. I didn't really look like inflamed or anything, like more inflamed than usual. So I was like, okay, that's weird. But throughout the entire time I was eating this way of eating, it was a month long, by the way, a month. That's it. Every time I was like, something just feels wrong. I never felt confident in that way of eating. I never did. I felt confident enough to approach it and adopt it, but I never felt extremely confident after I was eating. I was like, this much fruit cannot make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to be eating this way, that much fruit. And I was watching Paul's videos religiously, and I was like, he's making these arguments like, actually, no. I mean, in the equator, fruit's available year round, and it's super juicy and all this stuff. It has lots of sugar, and it's totally normal. And I'm going, okay, fine. And I continue eating this, but I'm going, this isn't right. Well, this all culminated in me watching a video from Paul about this thing, this random weird thing called the Randall cycle. That's weird. And watching it, and I'm watching it just because it's Paul, and I'm going, I don't know what the hell you're even saying. I don't know what this is. I've never heard of it. Bye. I'm not watching it.
Yeah.
You clearly know what you're talking about. That's what was going on in my head. You clearly know what you're talking about, though. And the next day, I saw a video in my feed called it was called Paul Saladino wrong again on the Randall cycle or something like that.
I know this video. I think.
Yeah. I'm going to what is this? And I clicked it, and this guy, this irascible character that looks like he just woke up, put a robe on, and had a cup of coffee in his hand, was talking shit about Paul Saladino. At the time, I'm like, Paul's my guy now. Like, I know this doesn't sound like everything he's saying sounds right, but he's my guy now, so I don't really understand what's going on. And I'm saying things like, I'm like, okay, so who are you? I don't know who you are. It looks like you've got a low follower base. You've got like 30,000 subscribers or something like that. So, and in my head, I mean, all these things, all the primitive ideas, like the primitive thoughts that go on in your head, like, okay, you're clearly not as popular as Paul, so therefore you must not have as much integrity as Paul. Like, I don't know. And he never exactly disclosed who he was either. He just started going into this rant on Paul, not letting him speak full sentences. That was another thing that was going on in my head. I was like, let him speak, man. The complete irony of all this was I didn't even understand what Paul was saying in the first place. So how was I going to say, let him speak, when I don't know what he's saying full sentences? So, yeah, I was really, really angry watching Bart's video. So for people that don't understand, Bart K is the person that I was that I was exposed to, and I didn't know if he was like a vegan, because he didn't disclose who he was. I was like, you're just going into straight what the video is saying. Here's the responses, and I couldn't help. I closed the video off. I was like, what the? I couldn't. I thought he was the most pretentious, offensive figure that I could. I was like, how dare this guy that's like a nobody, at least I perceived him to be, say this thing about this doctor that is very humble and knows exactly what he's talking about. But if anyone knows anything about marketing, you know that if you anger people, you still get them curious. You still get them curious. So I went back to that video and I watched the whole thing through. I watched the whole thing, and halfway through, I'm going, oh, he's validating my insecurities about the diet that I've been having. He's doing it right now about the carbohydrates. Oh, he's not vegan. Throughout the video, I'm going, oh, he's not vegan. He's like a pure no carbohydrate carnivore. Because of course I thought Paul's diet was carnivore in the first place. He's like pure no carb. And then I'm like, I look at the bottom of the screen. It says nutritionist, physiologist, I'm like professor. I'm like, wait a minute. Is he actually all of those things? Seriously? I thought you were just some rando on YouTube. And so then I watched the next video on Thomas DeLauer. That was around the I was like, oh, okay, I see what's going on now. I really think he's onto something, actually. I really think he knows what he's saying. And I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks later, I actually transitioned slowly over to a pure no carbohydrate carnivore diet. And for 2 years, while I'm undergoing these treatments, I started taking Cerule products, and that was something else that, since Bart was promoting him, I was like, he seems like a no-nonsense guy. I mean, I'll take the product, and it wasn't doing any harm to me. In fact, a month later, I had no acne on my forehead that I've had since I was 12 years old, ever. That completely dissipated. However, that could have been the adoption of carnivore. No way to tell. But for 2 years straight, as I was going back and forth between Florida for treatment, staying there, and home, I was on a no carbohydrate, like carnivore diet, eating all grass-fed, basically grass-fed steaks, grass-fed ground beef, grass-fed butter, pastured eggs for, 2 years straight, actually. Yeah, about 2 years. That's what I was eating. And then Christmas came along, womp womp. Thought I could test my luck, and had 50 grams of carbs. And it wasn't even in the rice or potato form. It was like, oh, there's a Reese's cup on the table. Oh, let's try that. Yeah, not good. But it was an interesting experiment for that month, because I had I had symptoms come back. I realized what the carnivore diet was really doing for me whenever I transgressed. So anyway, that's when I started the carnivore thing. The channel and the book thing was different. I know that this is like I said, this is quite a long story, but this is, like I said, anytime anyone asks for the story, I give them.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
No,
Keep
and
going.
you know, it's really quite good, Eddie. And just want to stop for 1 second because your video's lagging a little bit. Do you want to stop and restart? I can cut this out after anyway. So anyway, you're starting the carnivore thing, so we can cut that.
Yeah, that was basically the carnivore journey. So ironically, it didn't help. It didn't cure. I'm not one of those people that the carnivore diet cured anything, but it helped in ameliorating a lot of symptoms that I was having, and it helps with my treatment process. Because I basically got hypermobile EDS. So it doesn't just afflict my neck, it affects my whole body. They identified it in my neck. And I was like, oh, I've got CCI. My whole entire body has this problem. And I was like the top 1% of their cases. I see people from all across the world, and I'm getting all these treatments. So
and you had that doctor on your podcast, because I heard your interview with him. You brought him on.
So that was
your channel.
Yeah, so that guy was the Dr. Hutcherson. He is the chiropractor that worked at the clinic.
Okay.
So then he opened his own private practice and does tendon dry needling, which is another thing. I've just, that happened a lot later, and I realized the efficacy of that after PRP and all that stuff, which I still need some of, but because I'm not fully cured. But yeah, that's what started me on the carnivore sort of approach. The channel was different. I was living with my grandmother at the time because she was the only one in Florida. Like, if I didn't have anyone to stay with there, then we would have been paying for a hotel or like some place for me to stay for months on end. And we did not have that money. So my grandmother lives there, and I was staying with her. It was a very lonely time, because as much as family is someone that you can get along, like, or people that you can get along with, there's a difference between having friends and having family. I was basically living in a bedroom because I was like, okay, you're family, but we don't get, like, we're not like close, like you can be with a friend. We don't talk about the same things, all that stuff, shared interests. And so I almost felt like I was like a space invader and all that stuff. But I remember after I discovered Bart's channel and realized he was a professor and realized he had all these other videos on a separate platform, I was like, oh, let me study. Like, let me really study this stuff. And from the time I woke up to the time I went to bed, I was watching his videos and writing down research papers. I was actually writing research papers about every single topic: heart disease, vitamin C, like scurvy situation, all that stuff, fiber. And I wrote about all these papers, and I was putting them in a Google Drive folder, and I was sending them to my friends and family because I was like, oh my, this is mind blowing, guys. Look at this stuff. Like, look at all this. But since they're not sick, they didn't care enough. They were like, "Oh, that's cool. I'll make sure to read it in a few years." So I was like, "Oh, that's this is amazing." And I realized I was doing this for months, and I eventually thought to myself, I was kind of laughing, and I was like, "Man, I could like I was talking to someone. I was like, dude, I could write a book with all this stuff. Like, it's pretty funny." And as I said that out loud, I went, oh, actually, you know what? Yes, I can. And so that night, I went into the office, and I went on this like the old like Mac 2008 like fat thick monitor, those iMacs, and I was trying to figure out how to work the old apps on there just to get Word up, and I wrote my prologue for the book, my book Contraindicated, that night actually. And I was like, well, now that I've started, I can't stop. And I spent the next 2 weeks writing the rest of it. Took 2 weeks. And the reason it took 2 weeks was because most of it was already written, because I had written all of it. I was just trying to retrofit everything together. And I thought that was it. I was like, oh, that's it. I'll just write the book. I'll try and get it released and everything. And that's it. Because I was mainly writing it, in a way, I was writing it for myself, because everything, when you write that many papers, it's still all over the place in your brain. You got to put it all together, like in a cogent sort of cohesive story, in a way, like, okay, and then look back and say, okay, well, now my thoughts are in order, and also, I can evaluate the integrity of the position. Like, does this make sense? And since it's released, the answer is quite evident for people. Like, obviously, yes, I believe in it and everything like that. But I was like, that's it. Everything is sound in my brain now. But I remember watching Bart later on, and my grandma walks out into the kitchen, and she goes, "What are you watching there?" I go, "Oh, you probably won't like it. Um, you probably won't like this, but you know, I can. It's this guy." And I explained who he is. And she goes, "No,
Language.
yeah. I'm trying to be like family friendly here," and I'm like, "Oh, well, since you asked." But she goes, "No, put him on the TV. I want to watch what you're." I was like, "Okay, well, you know what? Here." So I did that. And, oh man, she thought he was hilarious. It was relieving. I was like, "Wow, okay, so you actually enjoy this, so I don't have to like, try and turn the volume down and that stuff." I felt like I was like, I don't know, it was weird, but I was like, "Oh, well, great, because I want to show you all this stuff. I want to show you all this information here," and she wasn't even antagonistic towards it. She wasn't defensive. She was like open, and she was like, "Wow, that makes a lot of sense." But later, as we're like binging these videos, because I'm binging them too, we're enjoying all of them. She goes, "Eddie, you could do what he does. You know that?" And I said, no, I can't. I don't know. Like as much. Like, yeah, I wrote a book and everything, but like I don't really think there yet. And the big reason for this is because this is a big person. This is still a personality trait to this day. It's a blessing and a curse. I'm a perfectionist because I highly doubt my capabilities. I highly underestimate my capabilities. And the reason that that's a bad thing is because I don't take risks that I could probably be successful with. However, what it does mean is that the risks that I do take, I make sure they're like perfect before I release them. I'm not like a haphazard. I don't put things together haphazardly. I make sure that it's like really strictly in order before I release it. It's kind of what it's like. The book is the example. It is an example. So I actually called my dad that night, and he's like the voice of reason. He'll just tell me things with a straight face, like, "No, that's bad. That's good." Kind of, he's that kind of person. And I said, she said like, "This is crazy. She said that I could do the videos that he does." And he was like, "Oh yeah, you could. I've been thinking that for a long time," because he was turned on to the content too. And I was like, "Really?" He goes, "Listen, I will invest $2,000 on equipment for you if you start up a channel and start making that content." And I said, "Okay, let's do it." And he was like, "Listen, no offense," and he was saying it in a funny way because I mean it's funny. We can laugh at it. We can look back and laugh now. But he was like, "Given how disabled you are, you've put me into some debt. So think of this as a business investment. I want the money back." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I get it," because he couldn't just give that gratuitous amount of money. We were laughing about it, but I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'll try and make that money back at the channel." Because he was like, "I have faith that you'll be able to make that money back because I have faith in you being able to do this." And I was like, "Okay." So I spent 6 months beforehand practicing making videos before I actually uploaded my channel and made it public. But um, I started my channel up on January 20th of last year, actually. And the videos even then still weren't perfect. I've gotten much better with it. But I remember I was like, I'm going to make this, I'm going to be dedicated to this because I felt no matter how excusable the reason was, I felt like a bum not doing anything. Like, even though I'm sick and disabled and debilitated, whatever it may be, I'm like, the fact that I'm not working makes me feel like just, I don't like being dependent on other people. So I was like, I'm going to treat this like my job. Like, it will be my job, 9 to 5 every day, that type of job, 40 hours a week kind of thing. And I actually overdid it. I was working even more than that. And I was like, no, I'm going to build a brand. I'm going to do this. And something I'm really grateful for is actually coming down with my condition. And I'm grateful for it in many ways. But one of the main reasons that's relevant to this is the fact that it made death feel far more tangible than modern day people think of it as. But as a consequence of that, it made everything feel more tangible. Success, fame, even though I'm not going for fame, but it made everything feel more tangible. Like I could actually start up a channel and do this. Like I could do it. And so as a consequence of that, like I said, I started up the channel, but also I thought, you know what? I'm going to get a hold of Bart and I'm going to like talk to him and I'm going to be like friends with him and stuff. And well, lo and behold, months later, I get on his channel. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is the real deal right now. Like I'm actually in the space, even though it's like my introduction. It's like, well, I'm going to really be dedicated to this. And so Bart actually gave me my first rise to like my first 1,000 subscribers, for example. He got me started up. And after that, it was just, I was dedicated to all that. I was taking multiple classes at the same time. Biochemistry, people kind of know me as the guy that knows like biochemistry, muscle energetics and stuff like that. I didn't know all of that in full when I started the channel. I'm not going to pretend like I did. I was learning at the exact same time. It was kind of like, I wanted to keep waiting, but my dad was like, hey man, that stuff's waiting for you. I was like, okay, I get it. All right, I'll just do both at the same time. And I'm still learning. I'm never going to say that everyone, people, if someone says that they're not still learning, they're lying to you. Like, like there is still much more to learn. So I'm not saying I'm not still learning, but the fundamentals I was still learning at that point, and I've got the fundamentals down like the back of my hand. I know them like the back of my hand, and that was what I really wanted to get to first. So that is what leads me to where I am now. I mean, that's where I'm building a lot of other stuff too. I'm working on a lot of other things, some of which I have to keep behind closed doors still. Can't ruin the surprise, but yeah, that's where I am now. I know that was a very lengthy story, and believe it or not, I still left quite a bit out, but very long story. But that's where we're at.